Chicago International Amphitheater, October 1972. $75,000 in a black briefcase at the edge of the ring. 76 men had tried to collect it. 76 men had failed. Some lasted 3 seconds, some lasted 9. The longest anyone survived was 21 seconds. A former Marine from Paris Island, a man who had seen things overseas that most human beings spend their entire lives praying they will never have to imagine. And even he left the ring with his shoulder dislocated and his eyes wet with something that had nothing to do with pain. The money had been sitting in that briefcase untouched for 18 months across 9 cities. Boxers, wrestlers, paratroopers, former college athletes who believed their youth and their size were sufficient. Not one of them collected it. Not one of them even came close. And then on a Tuesday night in October 1972, in the third row of the Chicago International Amphitheater, a man in a dark suit leaned back in his chair and said 3 words to nobody in particular. "I'll go up." The posters had gone up 2 weeks before. Black letters on yellow paper across every gym and barber shop from the South Side to Evanston. The Harrington Challenge. 1 man. Undefeated. 76 challengers. 76 failures. $75,000 in cash for any man who could remain standing inside the ropes for 30 seconds. Below the prize, printed in smaller letters, a number that functioned less as information and more as a verdict. Average time before defeat, 7 seconds. His name was Clarence Bowen. They called him the Iron Duke, 6 feet 5 inches, 510 pounds of trained professional mass assembled across 14 years and 2 continents. His neck was wider than most men's heads. His grip, when it closed, generated compression force that had no useful comparison in ordinary life. A former Army lineman from eastern Tennessee who came back from Vietnam in 1968 with 2 citations and a silence about certain things that lasted considerably longer than any physical wound. He had discovered professional wrestling the year he returned and found it was the only context in which the size and the force and the particular kind of controlled aggression he had developed felt appropriate rather than frightening. In 76 attempts across 9 cities, not one challenger had remained standing. Harold Jacobs, the promoter, had been running this tour for 18 months with the specific confidence of a man whose arithmetic has never once been wrong. What Jacobs did not know, standing at ringside on this Tuesday night with his microphone and his open briefcase, was that 3 rows back, a man was watching Clarence Bowen with the particular quality of attention most people reserve for problems they have already solved. His name was Muhammad Ali, 30 years old. He had lost his title to Joe Frazier 18 months earlier and had been clawing his way back, fight by fight. He was in Chicago for a press appearance the following morning. He had walked into the amphitheater on impulse, paid for a ticket, and sat in the third row because the International Amphitheater on a Tuesday in October was exactly the kind of place where something worth seeing might happen without anyone expecting it. He had not known about the Iron Duke when he sat down. He found out the same way everyone else did, which was by reading the program. He read it once, he read it twice. He folded it and set it on his knee and watched Clarence Bowen destroy 3 challengers in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. The first was a construction worker from Cicero, 230 pounds, 5 seconds. The second was a former collegiate wrestler, 255 pounds, 11 seconds, which produced a specific quality of hope in the audience that the 12th second immediately extinguished. The third introduced himself as a regional heavyweight boxer. 4 seconds, 3 more failures. The briefcase still locked, the money still inside it. Jacobs raised the microphone. "Anyone else? Last call, $75,000, 30 seconds. Anyone?" The room said no with its silence. Then from the third row, calm as a man commenting on the weather, 3 words. "I'll go up." Jacobs squinted past the spotlight. Who said that? The man stood, dark suit, white shirt, no tie. When the spotlight found his face, the amphitheater went completely quiet. Not the silence of a crowd watching something dangerous. The silence of a crowd recognizing something it had not expected in this building on this night. Someone in the 5th row said the name out loud, and the name moved through the building in a wave. half astonishment, half something that had no name. Ali was already moving toward the ring. His walk through the crowd was not the walk of a man performing confidence. It was the walk of a man who has already seen the end of something and is simply closing the distance. He climbed through the ropes. His feet made almost no sound on the canvas. He walked to center ring and stood across from Clarence Bowen, and for the first time the two men were in the same light. Bowen looked at him the way mountains look at everything, without adjustment, without concern. Ali looked back with the expression of someone who has just confirmed something he suspected from 3 rows away. What Ali had seen from the third row was not what 76 men before him had seen. They had seen size. They had seen mass. They had performed the arithmetic of survival and found it unfavorable and charged anyway, because the money was real and the hope was real and the body believes in its own exceptions. Ali had watched Bowen for 40 minutes and seen something different. Something in the way Bowen dropped his left shoulder before he committed his right arm. The specific tell of a man trained in a system that had never met anything the system could not answer. In 40 minutes, Ali had counted that tell 17 times. But he had also seen something else. Something the other challengers had missed entirely because they were too busy measuring mass and calculating odds. Ali had seen the way Bowen carried his left side when he walked back to the neutral corner. The specific posture of a man bearing something invisible. Something healed on the outside only. Ali had spent years watching men carry wounds that the body had closed and the mind had not. He recognized this one from 40 feet away. The bell rang. Bowen came forward the way he always came forward, both arms wide. The committed entry of a man whose mass had been sufficient 76 times. And then something happened that had never happened across 9 cities. Ali didn't move away. He stepped 14 inches to the right. Just enough. Bowen's arms closed on empty air. He turned around, confused. This had never happened. He came again, faster. Ali stepped left, and as the enormous right arm swept past him, he placed his open right hand flat against Bowen's chest, not pushing, simply resting, and said something quiet enough that only Bowen could hear. The crowd could not hear the words, but they could see Bowen's feet slow. They could see something change in the enormous man's body, a shift that had nothing to do with physics or force, or the arithmetic of mass versus speed. Bowen stopped. Not because he was hurt, not because he was tired, not because Ali had found a gap in his defense and exploited it. He stopped because Muhammad Ali, in the middle of a challenge match in front of 3,000 people, had said 6 words that only one man in that building could possibly understand the weight of. Ali had watched him for 40 minutes. He had read the posture. He had recognized the specific bearing of a man carrying something the discharge papers could not account for. And he had chosen to speak to that instead of to anything else. The 6 words were not strategy. They were not a taunt. They were this: you came back. That takes more. Bowen stood in the center of the ring with Ali's open hand on his chest and said nothing for a long time. The crowd held still. Even Jacobs held still. The clock on the wall said they were past 30 seconds. The challenge was technically over. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody moved toward the briefcase. The moment had stepped outside the rules the way certain moments do, and everyone in the building could feel it without being able to say exactly what they were feeling. Bowen looked at Ali for a long time. Then he said something back quietly, and Ali nodded once. Whatever passed between them in those seconds was not recovered by any journalist present. 3,000 witnesses saw 2 men stand in the center of a ring in perfect stillness and speak to each other, and the words belonged to them alone. When Ali stepped back, he turned to where Jacob stood at ringside. He pointed to the briefcase. "Give it to him," Ali said. His voice was calm and it carried to every corner of the building. Jacob started to object. "The money is yours, Ali. You lasted past 30 seconds. You won." Ali shook his head once. "I didn't come for the money. Give it to him." The silence that followed was the silence of 3,000 people recalibrating something they believed they understood about what a champion was. The Iron Duke, who had faced 76 men and felt nothing from any of them, stood in the center of the ring and accepted a briefcase with $75,000 from the man who had just made his undefeated record beside the point, and his eyes were not dry. He did not attempt to explain them. Some things do not require explanation to the people who understand them, and no explanation is sufficient for the people who do not. Muhammad Ali climbed out of the ring and walked back through the crowd. He picked up the folded program from his seat. He put it in his jacket pocket. He walked out of the Chicago International Amphitheater into the October night without speaking to the journalists who had recognized him, without posing for the cameras, without saying a word that could be written down and printed in the morning edition. He had not come for the money. He had not come for the record or the crowd or the cameras. He had come because a number had bothered him, and he had wanted to understand what that number actually meant. He understood it in 40 minutes from the third row. He confirmed it in 30 seconds in the ring. The number was not about mass or force or a challenge designed to be unwinnable. The number was about the question men ask themselves when they walk towards something that has defeated everyone before them. Every one of those 76 men had asked the same thing. How do I survive this? Muhammad Ali asked something different. He asked, what does this man actually need? That is the difference. That has always been the difference. Not the stronger arm, not the faster foot. The willingness to see, in the person standing across from you in the hardest possible moment, something more than an obstacle. Something worth considerably more than $75,000 in a black briefcase in Chicago in October 1972. The Iron Duke retired from the challenge circuit 3 weeks later. He went home to Tennessee. He coached youth football for 22 years. He never spoke publicly about what Ali said to him in the ring. But every journalist who ever asked him about the greatest man he had encountered received the same answer, delivered without hesitation and without elaboration. He didn't even throw a punch. And I never felt anything like it. So here's what I want to ask you. Think about the hardest room you ever walked into, the moment when everyone around you expected you to fight back, to defend yourself, to prove something with force. What if the bravest thing you ever did wasn't the punch you threw, but the question you chose to ask instead? Tell me in the comments. I want to read every single one.